In December 1994, Apple partnered with Japan's largest toymaker, Bandai, to create a gaming console. The console was an attempt to create a low-cost computer for playing multimedia CDs and browsing the internet. Apple's involvement would be to define the initial logic board design, aka the software, and Bandai would provide the casing and packaging, aka the hardware. Bandai's previous gaming console, the Palladium, was on the market already, but failing. The company looked to Apple to supply its hardware expertise to make something more powerful, and ultimately, more fun. So in 1995, a year after the initial meeting, the Apple Pippin was released. It was a video game console for kids, based on a simplified version of the Mac operating system, designed to be a cheaper alternative to other video game consoles. Its hardware specifications, theoretically, were way better than that of contemporary consoles of the era, and it was faster and more powerful than most other consoles on the market. As for the specifications, it had a PowerPC 603 microprocessor, 6 MB of RAM with an expandable memory of up to 8 MB, 128 KB flash ROM, and a 4x CD-ROM drive at a time when only cartridges were being used. The console had 3 video options: VGA, S-Video, and a composite NTSC or PAL with a display of up to 16.7 million colors. The Apple Bandai Pippin is one fine-looking piece of equipment. Viewed from above, it's an almost perfect square, with the rear half of the system's shell perforated with 540 tiny holes that act as ventilation inlets. The front portion of the system's top plays host to the rubberized operation controls such as the power button, play button, along with stop, fast forward and rewind buttons. Moving down to the front panel, the Apple Pippin features a deep CD draw, emblazoned with the colorful Pippin logo, which is in turn seated upon a broad sweeping lip that almost makes the system appear as if it is smiling at you. Moving further down the front panel, the 2 controller ports sit astride a central 3.5mm headphone jack, while further out 2 pillars, on the right, is the PowerPC logo, and on the left is the Atmark name. When we get around to the rear of the Pippin, we are treated to a truly wondrous array of connection ports for a system born of the mid-1990s. Moving from left to right, we are greeted with a 3-pin power socket and a fan vent. Next to this is a VGA out socket, which in turn is partnered by a curious 3-way switch through which the Pippin's output can be switched from the aforementioned VGA to PAL to NTSC. Moving along further, we find the S-Video and RCA outputs, as well as audio inputs and finally ports for the optional fax and modem peripherals. Turning the Pippin on its back presents another couple of ports. One of them is hinged and allows for the installation of an optional 2, 4 or 8 MB RAM upgrade. The Pippin's controller, called the Applejack, had a boomerang-shaped design which looked unorthodox, but when held, may actually have been comfortable and pleasant to use. The Applejack's twin horn design allows for the unit to be gripped easily by 2 hands. The prongs are long enough that hands both large and small are easily accommodated. With index fingers resting on the 2 shoulder buttons, the main face buttons and circular D-pad are easily reached by the thumbs. The D-pad is really only a 4-way digital pad, but the circular design gives the illusion of an 8-way input. The face buttons on the right of the Applejack resemble the Xbox in terms of color and are imprinted with dots, rather than letters or shapes or numbers employed by other systems. They are arranged in a familiar diamond shape but oddly are not numbered sequentially. Button 1 is on the right, 2 at the bottom, 3 at the top and 4 on the left. Perhaps the most interesting thing about the Applejack, though, is the inclusion of a trackball right in the middle of the controller. The trackball doesn't click in or do anything as fancy as that, but it does add a whole new dimension of control to a pad that is about as close to a mouse or a joypad. In addition to the wired controller, Apple built a wireless version that used IR to communicate to the console, as well as a Pippin keyboard with a drawing tablet, Pippin modems, Pippin memory, Pippin floppy dock, and a Pippin 230 MB optical disc. The Pippin was first released in Japan under the name Pippin Atmark. Makoto Yamashina, CEO and president of Bandai, predicted that 200,000 units would be sold in Japan within a year, but upon release, the sales were not very convincing. A year later, the Pippin was released in the United States under the name Pippin World. Since the Pippin was based on the Macintosh, a computer very popular in the US, Bandai predicted that it would outsell the Japanese consoles and that 300,000 units would be sold in the first year. But the sale figures were disastrous, with the US sales actually being worse than the Japanese one. In early 1997, due to poor sales performance, the production of the Apple Pippin was stopped and Bandai announced that it would stop the production of all models of the console. Now, how did a machine as powerful and as way ahead of its time as the Apple Pippin do so badly in sales, and ultimately disappear from the face of the earth? Well, it's because of not one but several reasons. Firstly, there was the competition. At that time, the Nintendo 64 and Sega Saturn dominated the console market, and the now hugely successful Sony PlayStation hit Japanese stores in 1994 just before the Pippin itself launched in March 1995. Despite trying to be an inexpensive computer, it was priced at $599 at launch, when the consoles it competed with, the Nintendo 64, Sony PlayStation and Sega Saturn, were far cheaper, with the Nintendo 64 being $199 at launch, the Sony PlayStation being $299, and the Sega Saturn being priced at $399. Furthermore, the Apple Pippin was never given a direct focus. As it was both a computer and a console, most games were educational or programs which were more for a computer than for a video game console, which only caused people to ignore it, and as a result it was a failure. Its complex design made it difficult for third-party developers to program games for the system, so third-party games were limited on the system. Only 80 games were made for the Apple Pippin, with the complete collection in Japan and only 18 in North America. Besides that, the catalog of games was not impressive or interesting, with too many educational games or programs. In the end, Bandai had sold only 30,000 units in Japan and 12,000 units in the United States. Unsold US inventory was returned to Japan to be sold by third parties and destroyed. Well, that's all we have for you today. If you enjoyed this video and want to hear from us again, be sure to leave a like and hit that subscribe button before you go. Thanks for watching.